Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to take a really fascinating journey. We're starting right inside the walls of a home and then expanding all the way out to the abstract mathematical frontiers of the land itself. If you've ever found yourself wondering where exactly the legal line is drawn between what you own and the literal earth it sits on, well, you are in the perfect place.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, real versus personal property. Second, the IRMA fixture test. Third, legal land descriptions. Fourth, calculating acreage. And finally, we'll wrap up with a scenario-based knowledge quiz, so keep your ears open for that.
Section 1. Property, real versus personal.
You know, whenever real estate changes hands, one of the absolutely most common and honestly most heated legal disputes is about what exactly transfers to the buyer and what leaves with the seller. To solve this, the law uses a pretty stark dichotomy. On one side, we've got real property. This is the physical land, everything permanently attached to it, and naturally growing uncultivated vegetation. Then on the other side, we have personal property, which lawyers also like to call chattel or personality. This is basically anything that has a limited life and is easily movable. A good rule of thumb, if you can pick it up and put it in a moving truck without ripping down a wall or damaging the structure, it's generally personal property.
Moving on to Section 2, the IRMA fixture test.
So what happens when that movable personal property gets permanently attached to the real property? Well, it enters this fascinating legal gray area and becomes what we call a fixture. Let me give you a real-world scenario to show you why this matters. Imagine you're selling your house. You just spent good money on custom storm shutters. When it's finally time to move, can you just take those shutters with you to your next house? Or do they legally belong to the buyer who just purchased the property? Getting this wrong can literally tank a real estate deal.
To figure this out, courts use a really specific four-part legal framework. One of our sources shares a fun little anecdote to help remember this. Just imagine a very stoic judge named IRMA, who uses a test humbly named after herself, the IRMA test. It stands for Intent of the Parties, Relationship between the Parties, Method of Attachment, and Adaptation of the item. Let's break that down. Intent looks at what the parties actually meant to do. Relationship often favors buyers over sellers or tenants over landlords. Method looks at how firmly the item is attached. Is it heavily screwed in or just resting there? And finally, adaptation asks if the item was custom fit for that specific space.
So the crucial point is this. A clear, written agreement in the contract always supersedes all other physical tests. Seriously, it does not matter if an item is bolted to the foundation with industrial steel or custom fitted to the exact millimeter of a window frame. If your written contract explicitly says the seller gets to take it, then the seller takes it. Always, always put your inclusions and exclusions in writing so you can avoid ending up in Judge Irma's courtroom.
Now, there is a really critical nuance here when we shift gears over to commercial real estate. It's known as a trade fixture. Think of, say, a dentist renting a commercial office. They install these massive, heavy, specialized dentist chairs, and they bolt them directly into the floor and into the plumbing. Now, while that seems incredibly permanent because it's a commercial relationship and the item is specifically for their business operation, it actually remains the tenant's personal property. So when the lease is up, the dentist can absolutely take the chair with them, provided they repair any damage that was caused by removing it.
We see another completely unique exception when we head out into the fields. Cultivated annual crops, things like corn, wheat, or citrus fruits, are legally called emblements. Now compare that to natural uncultivated vegetation, like a wild oak tree, which automatically conveys with the land. Emblements are different. They're legally classified as personal property. This means a farmer actually retains the right to harvest the crops they planted this year, even if the land itself gets sold right out from under them before harvest time.
Section 3, legal land descriptions. Let's look at how this builds from the micro level of indoor fixtures all the way out to the macro level. How does the law actually map and record the physical boundaries of the land itself? Because a simple street address is nowhere near precise enough for a court of law. Instead, we use three primary legal land description methods. First up is the oldest method, meets and bounds. This one starts at a very precise point of beginning, or POB, and uses physical monuments and compass bearings to trace the perimeter. Second is the government survey system. This is literally a massive grid spanning the country, using principal meridians, baselines, and 36 square-mile townships. And third, we have the lot and block method. This is what you typically see in modern residential neighborhoods, and it relies on recorded plat maps to carve a larger parcel down into individual lots.
Section 4. Calculating property acreage.
Now, I know the government survey system sounds kind of intimidating, but it actually gives us a fantastic way to calculate exactly how much land is in a specific parcel. And don't worry, the math here is incredibly straightforward. And this brilliantly illustrates how it works. In the government survey system, one section of land is always exactly 640 acres. So when you read a legal description, you just take all the fractions describing the parcel, multiply them together, and then multiply that result by 640. So let's say we want to find the acreage of the northwest quarter of the southeast quarter of a section. We just multiply 1/4 by 1/4, which gives us 1/16. Then multiply that 1/16 by 640,
And boom. The answer is 40 acres. That is the exact mathematical size of that parcel. Just read the description, multiply the fractions, multiply by 640. It works every single time.
Section 5, Scenario-Based Knowledge Quiz.
All right, you've absorbed the rules of fixtures, land descriptions, and even some acreage math. Now it is time to shift gears. Let's actively apply what we just learned with a rapid-fire, scenario-based knowledge quiz. Here is Scenario 1. A commercial tenant operates a bakery, and they bolt a massive industrial deck oven directly into the concrete floor. When the lease ends, does that oven stay with the landlord as real property, or does it go with the tenant? Take a second and lock in your answer.
It goes with the tenant. Because this was installed specifically for a commercial business operation, it is legally classified as a trade fixture. So, as long as the tenant repairs that concrete floor when they remove it, that heavy industrial oven remains their personal property.
Okay, Scenario 2. Let's test out that math formula. Try to calculate the exact acreage for a parcel legally described as the south 1/2 of the northeast 1/4 of a section. Remember our golden rule regarding the 640 acres?
The answer is 80 acres. Here is how we get there. You take 1/2, multiply it by 1/4, which gives you 1/8. Then you multiply that 1/8 by the total size of a section, which is 640 acres, landing you perfectly at 80 acres. Great job if you got that one right.
Scenario 3. Let's say a seller has custom-cut storm shutters, but they aren't actually installed. They're just sitting there completely loose in a pile in the garage. Do they convey to the buyer as real property, or do they leave with the seller as personal property? Now, what's really interesting about this one is that it tests your memory of the specific components of that IRMA test.
They actually convey to the buyer. Even though they are completely unattached and just loose in the garage, they were custom adapted to fit the unique windows of this specific house. So, under the adaptation prong of the IRMA test, they have transitioned into a fixture, meaning they legally belong to the real property.
Scenario 4. Imagine you're reading a legal land description. It begins at a specific point of beginning and relies heavily on physical monuments and compass bearings to trace the property line. Which of the 3 macro-level surveying methods is this?
That is the meets and bounds method. Remember, meets refers to the distance measured and bounds refers to the direction. It is literally the oldest method of land description we use in the country.
And here is our final scenario. Cultivated corn. Is this classified as an emblement, meaning personal property, or is it real property? It's an emblement. Because it is an annual cultivated crop, the farmer gets to keep it as personal property. Well, to wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought. Take a quick look around the room you are sitting in right now. Apply the IRMA test. If you sold your home today and there was absolutely no written contract, what items around you would Judge IRMA say legally belong to the buyer? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.